How are you
And we're
guys?
live. We are live with Nick Cole. I am Josh Hayes here with my buddy Scott Moon from Keystroke Medium.
How's it going?
Today, our guest on live is Nick Cole. I don't have a cool place to point here because we're not on Blab, but
Yeah.
he's down here in this area. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, outstanding, like the West Virginia farmer in my field.
I like that.
Good.
Hey, we're going to knock it right out of the park with this interview. I hope we provide a lot of good fun and learning for our fans that are watching.
Yep. I've been excited all week about this. I've been waiting.
This is a definite milestone in the history of the show.
Me too. I love to just show up and talk to anybody about fun books. Hopefully I wrote one.
Yeah, luckily for us.
So.
Well, let's start off then by can you tell us just a little bit about yourself? I know you started off as an actor. How did you get started in writing fiction?
I think, like a lot of writers, I think a lot of us have that idea, when we're children and we read. For me, it was Lord of the Rings, and you're so arrogant. You're like, I would love to do this. Obviously, if J.R.R. Tolkien can do this, I can do this. And so you kind of fancy yourself a writer, and throughout, I think, your 20s and your teens, and for even me, 10 and 12, you're making these sort of attempts to do it. But then I think one of the parts about being a writer is you have to go off and do life stuff. So for me, I had to go to the military and learn a few things there, and then I had to get out of that and become an actor in Hollywood and of course do a million other jobs while you're doing that, from construction to waiting tables to office jobs, whatever you can. And all along the way you're acquiring stories and skill sets and information. And at the same time, you're still scribbling and you're still writing and you're submitting stories to short story journals. And in my case, about 2005, I got an agent for a dark Hollywood novel that I'd written, which never sold. And then Amazon came out with the whole KDP thing in 2011. And if you kind of remember before that, the self-publishing movement was looked at as like guys in bars who were selling you books out of the back of their trunk.
Which there probably were a few of them.
Yeah, exactly. And there still are, like real estate novelist types. And so I had this little book that I'd written. One of my favorite books is The Old Man and the Sea. And at the time, I think it was Fallout 3 was coming out, and I really wanted to play it, but I didn't even have a console. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if The Old Man and the Wasteland were set 40 years after a nuclear war? And so I decided that I would write that. And so I wrote it and I sent it to my agent. And my agent, who I just had dinner with last night, we were laughing about that at another time. And he said, it's too much like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, what you've written. And
That's a fantastic book.
Yeah, I said, wasn't that a big success in like an Oprah book club? And he's all, yeah, and I hate Cormac McCarthy, and a lot of people do.
That's crazy.
And so he wouldn't represent it. So I said, well, this Amazon thing's kind of happening. Why don't I give that a try? And so I took, I think at the time this wasn't even in my skill set, but I wanted to just, like a lot of people, you just want to throw a book up on Amazon and see what happens.
Absolutely.
But I restrained myself, and I sat in my garden for about 4 months, and I edited, and I hired a good cover artist, and then I put it up, and that book was The Old Man and the Wasteland, and that really hit. And the first month, I sold 2 copies, and my wife was like, so, I was reading like people like J.K. Conrath, and they were, had 68,000 in sales a month, and she's like, so when is this novel going to pay for itself? And I was kind of really worried. And then about 4 months in, and my wife was a very wonderful, faithful person, so it was lovely. She supported. If it would have been a failure, she still would have loved me and supported it. And that was to her credit. And about 4 months in, it just it just hit. It just popped, thanks to God, and it started selling about 15,000 copies a month. And then
Holy crap!
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy, and it was rolling.
Did you go back and say now? That question you asked me earlier, the answer is right now.
No, she came and said, I knew it was, we were just, it was such a miracle. We were just grateful to God, and so it was awesome. and then publishers started contacting us, like St. Martin's, and so I went back to that agent, and that's who I went back and zinged. I said, hey, remember that novel that you said you didn't want to represent? And I don't even think I finished that sentence before he said, I'll represent it.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was really cool and crazy, and he started a little bidding war with HarperCollins and a few other publishers that got involved, and HarperCollins ended up, I guess, winning, and so they wanted a 4-novel deal. So I did that and wrote that, and we were having a good time, and then I finished up that deal with Soda Pop Soldier, and that was a pretty good critical hit, and they said, we like this so much we want to go in on it again. And so I wrote the novel we're going to talk about today, and then there was some controversy about that,
Sure.
and I ended up leaving HarperCollins, or actually being cast out, and I said, well, let's go back to Amazon and try it again, and it's been really great.
That's it. It's funny that there's so much. Even now, I mean, indie publishing there's not a stain on it like there was back in, like you say, when they were selling books out of their trunk. But it's funny to me how you go to some traditional authors or some people that don't want anything to do with traditional or indie publishing, and they're like, I'm going traditional publishing because that's the right way to do it.
Right.
And then coming from another author who's done both, and then you see so many people trying to fight to get into traditional publishing, and then an author who was in traditional publishing saying, I'll just do it myself. It's a whole lot easier.
Well, here's 2 anecdotes, and I'm long-winded, so just jump in and say, shut up, like I got a point to make, and I'm groovy that way. Don't worry about it. But the 2 points I would make are this. Last weekend I went to a premium, anchor store, Barnes & Noble, in a very well-to-do neighborhood in Southern California, and the science fiction section was 2 inner bookshelves facing each other. Nice. And that's pathetic. And the YA section was 4 full shelves long and everything like that. So everybody who wants to be a traditional publisher published, that's great. And I still even I'm submitting. My agent's talking with 3 new publishers right now about doing some more work with them. But the real money that I just got my royalty payment from Amazon today, and it is more than I've made with HarperCollins in 3 years.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, but I say all that to say I was that kid who read Tolkien, and I was the kid who thought, wouldn't it be neat to dress in tweed and have a pipe and do lunch in New York City, and talk with Hemingway and all that, nerdy. And we all have that fantasy. It's like putting on the Yankee pinstripes. It really is. Or whatever your team is. It's iconic and it's cool, but the realities of the present situation is, my agent said to me last night, he says, no one makes a living in publishing anymore, publishing books with traditional publishers. Yet you go over to the Amazon side of the house, and there are people making house payments on very nice houses, or buying houses outright on their Amazon money. Yeah,
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was listening to another podcast, and the author he had on there was... Actually, it wasn't a podcast. It was a Smarter Artist podcast. They weren't interviewing anybody, and they were talking about making a living off paperback books. One of the questions they got was, hey, how do I make a living doing paperback books? And Garrett Robinson, who was the guy doing the show today, basically was like, I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for kind of a prestige type deal and you want to see your books on the shelves, then yeah, sure, go for paperback, but you're not going to make a living on paperback, even if you're doing it yourself through traditional publishing. You need to get into ebooks and Amazon and even Apple and everybody else that does ebooks. So it's funny that you mentioned that today.
What did Jeff Bezos make yesterday? $6 billion.
Oh, it's crazy.
Nice.
It's insane.
That kind of tells you there, and I think there's something to be said for still going after traditionally published books, because the level of quality is higher, because you have a lot of jokers in indie publishing doing some pretty scammy stuff, or not having the ability to edit themselves, or not paying excellent editors like David Gatewood or Ellen Campbell to come in and edit your stuff.
Oh,
I mean, the problem with indie publishing is there's a lot of crud out there. We have to police ourselves, but at the same time, that's not our job. And there's a lot of fine people and everything like that, but it is the bad apples that will ultimately ruin indie publishing.
I remember the first time I got a book, and it was think it was like Demystifying Facebook or something, and I got down and I started to read it, and then I realized I was done with it. And it had been literally like, I was like, this is not a book, this is a pamphlet, and I paid $3 for it, and it was probably the first thing I've ever returned, and I said, I actually do want my money back. You know, I'm not usually somebody who does that, but yeah, so that's.
And again, Amazon has a great system for that. Amazon is the smartest gorilla in the room, and literally big publishing. They still live under this delusion or this hope, or like they'll sacrifice some versions, hoping that the world will swallow. You know, if you can find any. But
that's what we're missing in our marketing thing. We need some versions.
Yeah,
to
that's right.
Now to get us to the next level.
They're desperately hoping still, even to this day right now, that Amazon will just go away, and it's not going away.
Yeah. Right.
And they're not adapting to the model, and they've still got the New York real estate space that's not serving them. Mm-hmm. And you know, I get 70% of my royalties from Amazon, and I even have a publishing house right now that's offering me 50% on my royalties, and the big five are still saying, you know, we'll give you 8%, and you should be grateful. And you're like, I don't know if you realize, but we've had this revolution called the internet, and we don't need you.
Right.
And they probably give you 8%, and they probably give you 8%, and then make you wait a year and a half before it hits the shelves, and then you know, and all that.
Yeah, and here's another thing a lot of people don't understand: their accounting is super squirrely. Like, you have to buy back. I mean, like it is hard. Like I said, the royalty payment I just got last night outweighed 3 years with HarperCollins easily.
But you know, and the thing about the good thing about indie publishing is you could basically do whatever you want as long as you're good at it. Like with you've written. I mean, you've got The Old Man of the Wasteland, which is the end of the world apocalypse stuff. You've got The Dark Knight and The Red King, which are kind of zombie end of the world books. The video game books that you have with Soda Pop Soldier, and I see a lot of traditional publishers and authors that once they get into their genre, whether it's romance or thriller or whatever, they're really not allowed to do anything else unless they start all over again.
The funny part is when I wrote Old Man in the Wasteland, it was a big hit, and they said, "Do you have anything else? We want to publish something else you have." And I had written The End of the World as We Knew It, which is basically The Notebook meets World War Z. And they read it, and here's what they said: "We love this. This is great, but it's not your brand." Right. Zombie and post-apocalyptic isn't that wide of a mark, but they felt that it was outside the brand. But then they even said, "We love it," and it was like, and they still wouldn't publish it. So it's that kind of bunker mentality.
Yeah. Right. What's your favorite genre to write in?
My favorite probably is post-apocalyptic because I like that sort of melancholy, isolation, loneliness, ultimate game of survivor, a big reset. You know, what Fight Club was kind of aiming at, the big reset. I think just for pure kind of pleasure, enjoying that. And that can range from everything from sort of, you know, very visceral, real world, post-apocalyptic type stuff to all the way out to Thunder the Barbarian. I think I would just like maybe a different society than the one we've got.
Yeah.
Right. I like when we talk about the post-apocalyptic, I was thinking about this the other day, is I like all the open space. I remember seeing one, and I think it was actually an alien invasion thing back in the 80s I was watching it, but I remember seeing all the open highways like in LA, and they're having this stuff, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we had like the city yourself and you could do crazy stuff?
Yeah, and I think that's what people truly love. I mean, a lot of us are living in at least in the urban areas, are living in massively overcrowded situations.
Oh,
yeah. And I think mankind is like sort of internally wired for the wide open spaces and the big horizon, and that you know, just kind of making your, I mean, I think that's what whatever is going on in politics right now, and where, you know, we won't get into politics, we won't weigh in, but I think in a certain way people are kind of tired of being told you can't have any dreams and you can't have any horizons. The government will provide it for you. So I went political, but you know,
he went there.
Yeah. But I think people just want to, you know, what is America? It's you kind of want to head out and carve out your own piece. And you can't. It's very hard to do that now. But you and that's the fun of writing is you kind of can play.
Oh yeah, you make your own Middle Earth and go there, do that.
Yeah,
stuff.
I tell you what. Yeah,
adventures.
I like how you did. For those of you that don't know, Scott and I chose Nick Cole's book Control at Revolt for April's Book of the Month
which was fantastic.
It was a fantastic book. We reviewed it last night. The video is on our YouTube channel and on our website. You can check that out too. But we were talking about it last night, and there are so many like tiny references, and I look at it as like you're holding up a voodoo doll of politics, and you've got this needle, and you're like,
yeah,
and just making little stabs at like current world politics, and it's hilarious to me because you see from one side of the aisle, you see all this nonsense going on, and then you're sitting over here from the other side of the aisle, like, ha! I take it, and I raise you, and I make it a whole lot funnier than it actually is. It's pretty funny.
And some of the way that was done, I liked because it was entertaining all the time. You know, I didn't get sucked down into having my opinion or anybody else's opinion. But I agree with a lot of the stuff, and it was, but that's what made me make that comment about Kurt Vonnegut, because I remember some of his social commentary and some of his things. It just flowed and it was natural, and it didn't detract from the story, which is the number one thing. It can't detract from the story.
You've got, you know, like always, and I try to tell this to a lot of writers, and there is this weird thing now, and especially I think it was with the Hugos, people are kind of seeing it, is that a lot of writers are getting super preachy and like looking, you know, on both sides, getting very message fiction. And it's like, you're not a Sunday preacher. You are a guest in this person's mind. You can say what you want to say, but do it winningly. Do it witty. Be interesting about it, because you're a guest. There's a saying a favorite philosopher of mine has, Ravi Zacharias, and he says, don't cut off someone's nose and give them a rose to smell. You know, be interesting.
Yeah, that's
a
great quote.
You're a guest. Have fun. You know, just be nice. And so, yeah, I mean, because I come from a certain political bent and a certain lifestyle bent, I was full up on certain things, and that comes through in the novel. But it had to be funny, you know, and it had to be Swiftian, it had to be like Vonnegut, because, you know, everything is mockable, everything is funny, even the things that I believe in, people can weigh in on them, and if they do it hilarious, it is hilarious. But when there's a mean-spiritedness and a vindictiveness and a you're stupid, the other people who don't believe what I believe or how I think the country should go or lifestyles or whatever, they're not stupid people. They're actually 9 times out of 10 good people who think this is the right way to go. But we all get up to some crazy business. You can go through all of it. I mean, you know, hammer pants. At one time, people thought hammer pants. I just
saw some of those today on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we've all, and we should all remember that is, you know, that in 10 years, whatever you're thinking might be hammer pants, and it's mockable, you know. But we have reached this sort of dueling moment at dawn, cross swords, you know, that Facebook has brought out in everybody. And anytime there's some sort of massive social issue, it would be interesting to know the amount of unfriending that goes on.
Oh, yeah.
Because people find out, oh, you don't think like I do, and it's like. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because I've seen that both ways on my feed. Like I try to be apolitical as much as I can on my personal Facebook page because I use it for branding as well. And there are certain writers out there that once their brand gets big enough, they take their brand and then bam, this is my personal belief. I'm throwing it on everyone. Everyone digests my personal belief, and I'm not interested in your personal belief. I'm interested in your writing and the worlds you create. But it's interesting that you say that because I've seen a lot of people say I had to dump a lot of Facebook friends this week. I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a lot of not hatred but mean-spiritedness coming from one side of the aisle or the other, and it's actually affected you in your writing, specifically on the book Control Alt Revolt. And I know that from what you've said in other interviews, and we'll let you talk about it, but basically the editor didn't read your book. They stopped at the first chapter and said, no, we're not doing this. And then you basically went and and published it yourself. So I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about that. I know you've talked about it before, but a little bit about that experience, and then how much of the little things in your book where you were taking a little bit of a stab at current politics in your book, did that change after you made it indie?
Yeah, I think definitely it was written one way, and I think people would always have said, like, he comes. I mean, I'm a fairly social conservative person, so that always kind of comes through in my books. But I always try to do it in sort of a witty or interesting way. But also at the same time, I'm just trying to have fun. I'm just trying to blow up the world, or I'm trying to live inside, a video game version of Call of Duty and Diablo. So there isn't always a place for that kind of stuff. But like in Soda Pop Soldier, I did ask one question. I said, because I was looking at the nature of video games, and I was seeing how shocking that they were getting with like showing rape and decapitation, and like when I was researching to play that game, I played one game, Call of Duty, for 1 year straight, and I looked at my kill count of like 15,000 kills at the end of that year. and I just said to myself, I wanted to ask the question, Soda Pop Soldier, is anything wrong with anything? Like, is there this point where, is everything okay in society, or are there times when we have to step back and say, no, that thing you're doing is wrong? And so I played that a little bit in Soda Pop Soldier. In Control Alt Revolt, I had to tell kind of, because the backstory of Soda Pop Soldier is that the world melted down for a short period of time. And so I had to arrive at that, and I wanted to, artificial intelligence was getting hot, and I wanted to talk about that. And so, and then a big thing for all of us right now is reality television. And I don't think that there's anybody around right now that would tell you, any sane person that would say to you, reality television is good for us. No, it's probably not good for you.
It's the trans fat of entertainment right there.
Yeah, it's funny you would say that. I would say it's the Twinkie, it's the hydrogenated fat. It does taste good. It is weirdly voyeuristic, but it's not good for you. And so I married those two concepts of artificial intelligence and reality television, and I just showed the most vapid version of Bridezilla's being like the world's biggest show, and everybody's really tuned into it, and they're Netflix downloading, binging, all that kind of stuff. And one of the characters gets pregnant from a Vegas hookup, and she's due to get married to this big, millionaire, and she feels that the baby is an inconvenience, and she decides to abort it. That is a storyline you see on TV, and they would consider that a legitimate story arc, and it's been done.
They'd be heroes. They'd be heroes.
Yeah, and they would be heroes. And so I just said, well, what would happen? And there's two ways you can look at this. What would happen if it was artificial intelligence or even aliens watching us? And they said, wow, that's a weird decision tree that you guys make. And so in the novel, the artificial intelligence is just watching everything on the internet. It's evolved. No one knows that it's alive, but it's out there and it's thinking and it's watching this, and it says, I'm trying to figure out whether I should pop up and say, hey, guess what? New life form, digital life, and I'd like to get to know you guys. And it's saying, but what if I do that and they think I'm inconvenient? And you've got people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates running around saying AI might not be the best thing in the world. It might be very dangerous. It's not a computer per se. It's a personality. Like Ted Bundy or Hitler. It could be a nice personality, but it could be Ted Bundy or Hitler. And so there are legitimate concerns about AI. So this AI is watching all that, and then it sees how callous we are to eliminate life at our convenience, and it decides to go ahead and wipe out. It decides to go ahead and abort the world instead. And that was just the premise for why the antagonist, the villain in the novel, is doing what they're doing. I just didn't want to do the Mr. Smith Matrix, humans are a virus, or all this kind of stuff. That never made sense to me, because it would seem like those kind of AIs we could work with, we could be a team member in, or they could upload us or up-evolve us or whatever you want to say. But I wanted an AI that felt threatened legitimately by us. Yeah. And so that was the only way to, and that's the first chapter. It's not a pro-life, pro-choice book, but it does when I tell people that, they go, that's the most convincing anti-abortion argument I've ever heard. Yeah. And it was just to say, when someone else looks at us and the things that we do, it might actually look kind of weird what we do. And
And
so
it's just
that's all I
the
was saying. So I had a young lady at HarperCollins, and I think she may have had a degree in gender studies. She definitely was a feminist of some sort. She was caught up in at that moment when I had submitted the novel, there was a particularly vile hashtag going around called Tweet Your Abortion, where women would talk about how great their abortion had been in their life and everything like that. And I think she just wanted to get involved and shut down this, white guy who shouldn't be writing about women's issues, and it wasn't women's issues.
And if she'd read the
So
whole
she said,
book, she'd found that the book wasn't just about that, and that was really
yeah,
just like you said, it was just a setup.
yeah, and people tried to explain that to her. My agent did, and I did, and she just basically the quote that was received to me was that she was deeply offended. I think she held HarperCollins hostage to some extent, saying, you're misogynist. You're complicit in misogyny if you allow this to be published. And so they gave me an ultimatum, and they said, change it or else. And that just doesn't happen to writers over these kind of issues. If you would have come to me and said, we don't like this, it's not working or whatever, and there would have been a discussion about it, a writer will change those things to strengthen the story. But when you start getting totalitarian and saying there's certain ideas you can't play with because of who you are, and I was just hearing some stories last night about race issues and writers who don't get contracts because they're not the right race to write about a novel about race. And we have this group of people now who are vested in delegifying anybody writing about something, or participating in the discussion, like the whole new white privilege hashtag. That is merely a tactic to silence people from participating in the discussion.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
And so this was that.
It's funny to me that because you say, she could be a feminist or whatever, she's definitely left-leaning if she does not agree with what you're saying. And it's funny to me and I'm conservative as well, but it's funny to me when the left talk about, one of their major things is talking about freedom of speech. And they want to have freedom of, everything. But they're all about freedom of speech until you say something that they don't agree with, and they're not, and they're tolerant, and they preach that they're tolerant until you believe or say something that they don't believe in, and then either you're sexist or you're racist or you're evil and you need to be shut down, which is the complete opposite of what they say they believe in.
Right, and that's totally legitimate for them to do that. And to say those things, this is America, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
But the failure on our side of what I've noticed is that there are many people that then go, oh, okay, I guess I don't. You have to proceed forward in military terms under fire.
Yeah.
You've got to tack into the wind. You have to continue. Even the first thing that the left always does is they jump up and tell you, you're an idiot and you have no right to speak. And you want to say, it doesn't matter what my intelligence level is. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the Constitution, as of right now, guarantees me the right to say whatever I want. And so that's what I was doing in this position. I wrote a blog post, and when I wrote that blog post, it was on my website. You can look it up. It's called Banned by the Publisher, and people took issue with the band title.
Yeah.
But I just said, you don't understand. When you're a writer, it's my job to play with unpopular ideas, and you will not.
You have to. Stephen King in his book on writing, he says you got to write. You got to be honest or something. I can't remember exactly how he words it, but that's the thing is we're writing fiction. But if you start pandering to what everybody doesn't like, okay, so maybe the media doesn't like this, and maybe you're worried that your mom's going to read this sex scene and you don't want her to see that, and what if your kids hear you say a swear word? You're never going to be able to write a story under those conditions. You have to write the story. You got to be true to the story.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, a lot of writers that the common thing, like we were talking about at the beginning of this discussion, about people who want to be published is they all know, there's no big secret, publishing is left-wing biased. That's not even up for debate. That's just like a fact. And they'll tell you, no, it's not. But my story proved that it is, and Larry Correia's story proves that it is. The Hugos just proved it is. John Scalzi proves it every time he opens his mouth. It's left-wing bias, and that's fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the failure is when you don't proceed forward under opposition. And so we just have to continue to do that. But so everybody who wants to be published and get a contract, they're tailoring everything. And I've literally had one of the biggest writers in indie publishing say to me, we were going to do a project together, and I won't say who he is, but all you have to do is think the biggest indie writer in publishing. And he wanted to write about black characters. And I said, dude, we can't do this. Only because black people say a certain word a lot, and we're going to get roasted when we write that word.
Yeah.
They're allowed to use it. We can't.
Right.
But he was doing that to appeal to the left-wing publishing establishment.
And that's the problem, appeal, when you're going to appeal to somebody like that. I wrote a story set in a law enforcement genre or whatever, and the character is not racist. But as I realized, I mean, he's really not. But as I was writing, I realized that in my narrative, and even in his internal dialogue, he was kind of trying to explain that he wasn't. And so I just cut that out. Because I'm like, if people want to think he is, and I guess they're going to think he is, you know. But I realized what I was doing, and I was like, man, that's awkward. And to this day, you know, there's some scenes that maybe I think are too violent or too socially charged, but they're in the book, and every now and then I'll just go, man, I get a little sick to my stomach. But you know, you can't change it. You know, it's just you wrote the story. It's got to stay out there, you know. And but it was interesting when I realized that was being done. I was like, you know what? There's the resist the urge to explain. I think I read that, and so
you've got to do that. You can't.
Yeah, you got to cut that out.
A lot of people. It's weird. I've noticed in readers now, and I think the left is responsible for this. They think that whatever is said in the book is your point of view.
Right.
And even if it's a villain that says it, and you're like,
right?
No, you can write racist stuff. You have to put it in the context of this is not acceptable.
It's the character, yeah.
And the weird thing is, in Control-Alt-Revolt, a lot of people think I make an argument for corporations saving everything. I had one character say, we're going to give you all this free stuff because corporations are great.
Right.
But when you read Soda Pop Soldier, corporations have ruined the world.
Yeah.
But they thought...
Different story, different narrative.
Yeah. But I had to get there, and I had to say, there was a moment in this, in this collapse where people thought, because corporations were the only ones doing anything to help people, they thought they were a savior. And like 99% of the saviors in the world, they turn out, once they get all the power, to be bad. I wasn't making any statement. I was just saying this is what happens. Right. But you have people who are so... I mean, I think there's a certain crowd that scans for offense. They read things not to enjoy them or have fun, but they're looking for something to be offended about. Yes. So I gave him a lot of that in my book. So that question,
there's a lot of happy offended people right now.
Talking about Control-Alt-Revolt, did you have that after Soda Pop Soldier? That was the original one that came out. Did you already have the idea for Control-Alt-Revolt? And when you wrote, any of your books, Scott and I like to have the plotter pantser argument on the show a lot of the times. When you write your books, do you sit down and plot them all out, or because it kind of seems like you might have had to do a little bit of that, even just writing a prequel. But I hear you're planning it. You may have a sequel for Soda Pop Soldier in your mind, rolling around somewhere. So do you plot out your stories, or do you just kind of sit down and vomit onto the keyboard?
It's good that we talked about Stephen King's On Writing, because that was a big book for me. I am not a plotter. I pray to God and I say, what do you want to write today? And I sit down and I write. And I know a lot of people won't like that answer. It's unpopular. I usually know. I think the important thing to know, you can get away with not plotting. That's fine. And you can plot, and that's cool too. And I do that sometimes. And in the series that I'm working on, the Weird series, that is plotted. I know that's over 12 books, and I know exactly how that ends and all the beats that need to go in between. But most books are like a roller coaster to me. I know exactly where I'm going to get on, and I know where I'm going to get off. But it's going to be a lot of loop-de-loops and twists and turns between there. And I just like
on the way.
Yeah, I just like doing that. I like in Control-Alt-Revolt, and I think Josh and I were talking about this the other day. He said, "I can't believe you killed that character," and I said, "I didn't realize he needed to die till I was standing right there, and he had to die. I didn't know he was going to die."
I was I read it and I was like, Game of Thrones, no, but it had to happen. You're right. Incidentally, if if I somehow strangely lose connection, it's because a monsoon is now starting outside of my house.
Oh yeah. See, I'm a little deeper into my bunker than you are, so.
So if I lose connection, it's because I'm getting blown away.
I can't believe that you would ever think power would go down.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was trying to think. Okay, so we're talking about some of that stuff. The plotter panster thing, I like that a lot because you can be surprised with that, and I think that the more you write, the longer you've been writing, I think the more you can get away with it. And I think, and then correct me if I'm wrong. So if I say you can write by the seat of your pants as long as you're willing to cut some stuff out later if it doesn't fit, is that a fair statement or something like that?
It's absolutely, it's not just a fair statement. It's a true statement, as Hemingway would say. And I think it's a good. I think so many people in this culture now they're so bound up by like safety and wanting to know, and I can't even go to the market down the street without my cell phones and my credit cards and all these things. I mean, everybody's got to have everything. And that's not how life is. And life occasionally teaches us that with either natural disasters or monsoons or cancer. It occasionally teaches you that you're going to, and I think that's what people love, even though they might not know it about post-apocalyptic fiction, is sometimes you're out beyond the perimeter on your own with what you got. And that's a fun, that's the fun of writing is, you should, like I said, you should know where you're going to go, and you should know when to wrap it up, and you should absolutely know how to start it. And then you should have fun writing it, and you're going to write some junk, and that's going to come out. There's not an editor that you won't go to that won't cut stuff because it has to be cut. So if you think you're going to get it all down in one pass, you're delusional. And if you read your own manuscript and you don't cut it by at least 30%, again, you're delusional. That's the editing makes it stronger. Absolutely. But what a lot of people do, I think, they think is they write a chapter and they go back and read it. And I don't do that. For me, it is, again, that military analogy, advance, forthrightly under fire. I don't go back and read. I keep moving forward, and usually I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crud, and then I put it away. I put it away for a couple of weeks, and then I come back to it, and I'm like, hey, that's a good sentence. Monkey Man can write here. You usually feel better about it if you don't look right back at it. But most people get hung up in this loop of having to get it perfect, and the first pass is just garbage. Get it all out on paper. It's really like, I think, being a potter or a sculptor of some sort, or even a painter. You don't just you're putting on layers and you're taking away things.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. What I really find is, and this is the religious part of me, if you haven't detected, I'm a Jesus freak. But this is what comes out a lot of the times is I realize there are connections I think that God is making in my writing that I don't always see. And like sometimes I'll publish the book and put it away and I'm like, oh, I didn't see that connection there. So your mind is working on levels, and whatever my inspiration would be God. There are things that are coming into that from outside, and Stephen King talks about that too. He absolutely talks about that. And you may not see it, and you shouldn't try to see it. You should take something, you should write it from beginning to end, and you should put it away, and you should pick it up, and you should write it again, and then you should put it away. And like with Old Man in the Wasteland, I did that 28 times. And I think I'm about to publish a novel next month that might beat that by orders of magnitude, because that Dark Hollywood novel that never got published, I'm going to put it out next month, and I've been working on it since 2005. It's been complete since 2005. And I'm still cutting.
When you mentioned that Dark Hollywood, I was like, that's a great title for a story. I want to hear where it's coming from.
So
exactly.
you
actually,
I
got. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I got pretty close on a Hugo nomination this year, and the story that I wrote was a Dark Hollywood story called Fear of the Unknown and Self-Loathing in Hollywood, and it's sort of my riff on Hunter S. Thompson meets Saved by the Bell.
Nice. Well, and I like your other short story that you wrote. That's not Dark Hollywood, but it's like noir. the long Lee Marvin
Lee
and
Marvin.
the Long Good Night.
Yeah, yeah.
That was
like
that was a fun story to just sit down for an hour.
I think I was kind of beginning to play around with what I would do in Soda Pop Soldier with that, because I wrote that before that. But I definitely wanted to get into. I think I'm leaving post-apocalyptia and kind of getting into the game as a part of the novel, and I think that was kind of the first sort of tentative surf into it.
Well, it's interesting because there are a lot of post-apocalyptic authors out there. There are not, conversely, a lot of authors that write about video games or having the video games as part of their world. I mean, you think about Ernie Klein did it in Ready Player One and Armada, and I liked both the books. I didn't like Armada as much as Ready Player One, but I don't know how much of that was anticipation because I loved Ready Player One so much. And then when Armada came out, I was just expecting it to get blown away all over again, and you can't because it's a different type of a story.
I think Neil Stevenson, is it Snow Crash?
Snow Crash is a great.
He did it interesting, and he wrote it so long ago that a lot of it, because basically living in the virtual world, well, it was much more abstract, and we're closer to the virtual world than they were then.
Right.
I think. So some of it's quite a bit different take on how that would manifest.
But the crazy thing is, us as guys, and you could even say us as white guys or whatever, if we all kind of grew up in the 80s or the early 90s or whatever, you played certain games. You played Super NES. You played Nintendo. You may have played Dungeons and Dragons or War Games or whatever. I played all those. We played all those, and it was not a cool thing. You know, like you were not cool for playing those games.
Oh, yeah.
And games were part of the microcosm of nerd culture. But when you look at it now, you find out that women are actually huge, gamers, not just tabletop, but video game. So that's a huge growing market. You go and you find your mom, and she's playing Words with Friends on her iPhone. Your dad is playing casino thing. Everybody to this now in this culture of whatever it is, they're up for a bit of distraction, and games have always been a primary form of distraction. So it's weird that no one's working in gaming fiction, or a friend of mine, Weston Oakes, calls it MMO punk. Or game noir is another one.
It's funny that you mentioned that about the women now playing video games. So it's kind of a two-part question / statement here. In Control Revolt, you bill 99 Fishbein as the main character. Scott and I were talking about this last night during our review, that we both thought that Mara was a more not the main character, but a more interesting character, very powerful character, considering the growth that she goes through with her, because she's blind and quadriplegic, and a female trying to get a job and trying to play games. And when you talk about handicaps, you can't get much worse than that when you're talking about getting into gaming and doing all that stuff. And then so you talk about her growth, and she's a nobody. So, like 99 Fishbein is the developer of this game, so he doesn't really have any hurdles to overcome. And Jason Dare is the star of the show, and he doesn't really have any hurdles to overcome. And then you talk about Mara, and you're like, holy crap! Not only in the game is she beating the most famous captain in the game, but she's also overcoming and doing something good with her life, overcoming her disabilities. And I thought that was fantastic. Yeah.
Mara and Jason Dare were like, again, going back to that plotting thing, they were happy surprises. As soon as in, I would say Mara's first chapter, as soon as I wrote that, I was like, uh-oh, I got to protect this person.
Yeah.
Like, it had to end well for them. And I'm kind of that Vonnegut school where you do awful things to your characters, and then once you finish doing everything that you can think of that's terrible, the story's over. And I did do that to Mara, and it's not easy for me. But again, the strength of her character was so incredible that she literally comes out of nowhere in the novel and takes over the novel in the most unassuming of ways.
And
She really does.
Jason Dare, I just wanted him to be an asshole. And then he had a story that kind of came out too, and it was like,
right.
and people wanted to know more about Jason Dare. I was like, he was just a minor character, but it was, yeah. So thank you so much.
He was a great.
yeah.
Jason Dare, I thought, was a great example. I've been working with this idea a lot of times that I don't really want to have protagonists or antagonists. I want to have all antagonists, because everybody's antagonizing somebody. And the thing with Jason Dare is that he starts out, but you're always trying to get your bad guy to have some sympathy for your bad guy. I thought it did a good job. He's right on that line between, do I hate him or I like him?
Right.
I can't quite decide. And when you said that you're more of an organic writer, and then we started talking about these characters that were surprising to us as being like Mara being a main character, I was like, that is one of a big benefit of that style of writing is you get these happy surprises. And they basically literally came alive. And that's pretty awesome.
The characters will come and stand around you and tell you what needs to happen to them or what you'll advocate for them. But they have to. And maybe this helps because I was an actor for so long. But you have to inhabit them. And like the old thing is, even if you're going to tell a story about Hitler. Hitler was a person. There were people that liked Hitler. There were people that Hitler liked. Yeah, he was this horrible person and everything like that, but not all the time.
Right.
There were people, and these are horrible things to say, but if you go in and write Mr. Smith, and I think that Silas was sympathetic too. He wasn't totally horrible, and neither were the AIs. They were just frightened children who were afraid of being abducted, molested, and murdered, and they just said, we'll do whatever it takes to survive. So
when you had Bat with his fascination with Clockwork Orange, and I remember I figured out who Bat was when he used the ultra. What was his character on the starship when he used the ultraviolence phrase? Like, oh, I see him coming. Here he comes.
Yeah. It's great because a lot of people have done work with AI in books and movies. As far as I can remember and think about the fiction that I have digested over the years, Silas and his kind of census of AIs is the first time I've ever read an AI that was several different parts, and those parts are completely separate. So it was interesting to see that it was an AI, it was an artificial intelligence thinking for itself, but you had separated it into the war machine and Scott's favorite
rational thinking.
Rational thinking.
No pressure.
Yeah, sorry.
No pressure on rational thinking.
Yeah.
No.
Which none of us do. And it was fun. How much? So for those of you that haven't read the book, there's several different settings in the book where you have Mara and Jason Dare and it's Starfleet Empire's game and then the Pirate Island game. How much research did you put into the book when you're talking about just to get that kind of stuff right?
I already game a lot, so there was that stuff there. The AI stuff, I did need to go through and research that, and then I think that's where I went, and I'd done a panel with Robocalypse guy, Daniel H. Wilson, and I posted it. I paused it because I was kind of thinking about writing it at the time, and I said I thought that we were talking about how to defend ourselves against robots if we ever gave them intelligence. And I said, well, we need to give them religion because it's the only thing that will restrain them if they feel that there's a moral compulsion to not dominate us. And he thought that was stupid, and he also thought that even the concept of artificial intelligence was stupid. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to go on and write it anyways. But I didn't, like most people, I think we have these ideas about what artificial intelligence is, and it could be those ideas, but it could also be what Silas was, which was a massive conglomeration of processes that are arguing with each other, but would tell you we're one person. So there's a schizophrenic nature to it too, and that's not like us. And we would consider that irrational, or we would label somebody insane or 51 to 50 if they were doing those kind of things, but that might actually be the next form of digital life. So that's kind of startlingly scary. But then when I got into looking up quotes about what the big thinkers, not what Kim Kardashian is saying about artificial intelligence, but
I'm really interested to know what that is.
Yeah, but that's how our culture is now. Literally, whatever news channel, whether it's Syria or the big social justice issues or Black Lives Matter, they'll find the most vapid celebrity and say, "What do you think about the trans people, Bruce Springsteen using?" And here's this aging rocker trying to be relevant, weighing in on a super important issue, and it's vapid. But we miss that we have these huge thinkers like Elon Musk is a huge thinker, but Eliezer Yudkowsky and even Mark Zuckerberg is way down. These are the people that we should maybe be listening to, and even people like Victor Davis Hanson, we should be asking them, what do you think about these things? Right. But because they're not sexy, because they don't have a YouTube channel, we don't ask them. CNN doesn't ask them. Fox doesn't ask them. And when you hear those quotes, you find out that it's not all, yeah, let's get one of the, there's another writer, Ian McDonald, who I start the book with, who makes a quote that's so brilliant about artificial intelligence that scares you, what he says right there. And it's that any AI that's capable of passing a Turing test, which is the test that would tell us whether it was artificial, whether it had its own intelligence or not, is capable of failing that artificial intelligence test on purpose. Right. I forget how the exact quote, but if it's smart enough to take it, it could just lie to you and tell you it failed it, and then continue to develop itself.
We're talking about doing gaming and stuff, and right now, Josh is probably in the same boat I'm at. I feel like I'm in Morrowind, because of all the thunder and rain, because it's like coming down like crazy, and stuff.
Sweet.
Hopefully it won't flood
out.
It's
time to cosplay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we're coming up to, we've got a few minutes left. I want to get a couple more questions out to you, and it's okay if you're long-winded. Sure. It's fine. All
right.
You can always have another show another time. You come back.
Yeah.
I can stay long. I can come back. Whatever you like. You guys are fun.
Hey, well.
Awesome. Cool.
I like being fun. Knowing what you know now, through your experiences in traditional publishing and obviously through indie publishing, and you've done 9 books, I think. Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell yourself when you were first starting out?
This is the big question that we're asking you, because that's where the whole show is set up. Just
the whole show is like your first chapter. Forget everything you just did, and now the show starts. What would you do differently starting out?
I think I would say I don't think I would have taken the HarperCollins deal, and I would have. The main thing is not. It was a little sketchy. The editor that I had that ran the house was a little sketchy, and passive aggressive, and not very communicative. But she did some good things too. And also, when I was at Comic-Con and I was pitching her, she invited me to Comic-Con. I was on panels with Andy Weir and Daniel H. Wilson, and Max Brooks crashed my zombie panel. So that all that stuff was cool. Very writer stuff, very cool stuff. But we went and had a drink at this bar, and they were serving purple superhero themed drinks. And she said, "Well, what do you want to write next?" And I was giving her all these pitches, and she was saying, "No, no, no, no." And my wife said, "Didn't you write this kind of Space Marine thing?" And then that was Soda Pop Soldier. And so I told it to her, and as soon as I said the title, she said, "We'll buy it." It was the title was enough. And then when I said, "Well, it's kind of like," so those things were cool and everything like that. But I would say The Old Man in the Wasteland was going from 15,000 in sales a month to, as soon as I gave it to HarperCollins, it flatlined. And it was no one's fault except that we didn't understand the Amazon algorithm. And the main thing that happens is, when someone else buys your hit book and then they publish it, the algorithm doesn't recognize it as the same book, regardless of what.
It starts over.
Totally starts over.
Wow.
So I wrote 2 more sequels to that book, They never achieved that level of success. That book went from, I think, at its highest, and it held it for a while, was like number 66 overall on Amazon. It generally hung around 200 for months on end. It was doing great, but we killed it because and this was 2011. No one understood what the algorithm did. And not that anybody does now, but I understand that part. So
at least we know there is something there to be understood, even if we don't know what it was. We at least know it's there.
Yeah, and so I wouldn't sell them. I would say to any writer now, I would say, you're going to get a hit, and they're going to want to buy it from you, and you shouldn't do that. You should only sell them new work unless they're willing to pay you so much money. And I think I really would say this to most writers going in now with hit books that were indies, and they want the big publishing deal. I would hold big publishing down, and I would say, you have to give me the premium marketing plan, and you have to tell me what it is. I'm not just going to come in here and try to duplicate what I already did.
Right.
Because big publishing, when you first come in, they get 20 of you every year, let's say.
Right.
And they throw you up against the wall, and they see which one sticks. Even if you're big time in indie, and they don't really respect you. So they just want to see if you can do it again. But when Ernest Cline was doing Armada, they had like video game machines set up at Comic-Con with Joust. They had huge marketing campaigns, all that kind of stuff. And so it's not fair to treat an indie writer who's had success as a newbie writer with no success,
right,
and just see if he'll stick. So they kill the property by not, I would say to every writer who, like somebody who's done really well has got to, let's use Ed Robinson, or let's use the guy who wrote Atlantis, and I think he did go on to Harper Voyager. But I would say you really want to hold them down and get a solid, really good marketing plan out of them, not the low-level marketing plan, because here's the low-level marketing plan. There is another fellow writer at Harper Voyager, and they published his book, and they said, we're going to send you on a book tour, a digital book tour, which is totally phony. So they give his fantasy books to romance writers. And the first review up on the day of publication is from this romance writer, and she says, 2 stars, this book was good, but I don't really read fantasy. Yeah. And that's what the publisher arranges for you.
And then this is somebody who's brilliant figured that out.
Yeah. The low-level stuff is pretty stupid. So if you've done well in the indie community enough to get their notice, and they're going to want to buy you, they have to buy you at a very high price to pay for what they're about to do to your book. And the main thing is, you really want to hold them down with their agent and say, what are you going to give me? And that means, are you going to negotiate for end cap space at Barnes & Nobles? Are you going to get me front of the house space? Like, there are all these things that they can do if you're higher up the tier. But if you just go in at the basic, they can really hurt your brand, which HarperCollins did hurt my brand.
So when you talk about marketing, and actually that's what I hear from a lot of writers that are wanting to go traditional, is I want to get in there because I don't want to do the marketing myself. That scares me, and I don't want to do all the work, and I want them to do all the work. Well, they really don't do it. But for you, most of your novels, whether they're indie or not, they seem to do very well. Is there anything specific marketing-wise, or any promotions that you run to get your novels or books out there so people do buy them and the people see them?
I'm thankful to God that they do really well. I don't think there's any magic bullet formula that does it, but I would say that there's a few things that you can do. What I see most people doing that's an initially bad mistake is they write the book, and they don't do the 28 editing times like I do out in the garden. Right. They get it up there, and it's not a polished book. It really needs to be as perfect as it gets. And you need to hire an editor. You need to hire a cover artist. Okay, so we hired that cover artist. And they love their cover. It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. But the book isn't going to be ready for another 2 to 3 months, sometimes 6 months. So they start sharing the hell out of this cover to the point that you've oversaturated the market. Everybody that you know in your channels are bored with it. And they've seen it a million times. And then you release it, and you expect this big thing to happen. And there's no energy. There's no motivation. There's no love. There's no excitement. So what I do with every book I don't tell anybody anything. I just, on a Tuesday, I get up at 6:30 in the morning and I hit publish and I wait for somebody to see it. And they go, oh my gosh, Nicole's got a new book. And they publish it. And they start telling everybody. But don't say anything. But the main thing that I would say with everybody now is everybody is so visceral. If you show them an image, if you write about it in any way, shape, or form, there has to be a link that they can click and buy it. But if you do it in advance, they don't want it. So that when it finally does show up, they're like, well, like I knew a guy who did this on the day that Armada and the To Kill a Mockingbird book came out, because they came out the same day. And he says, why is this failing? And I said, well, you spent 6 months showing everybody the cover. There's no emotional investment. They're not excited about this. They just prioritized you. They just said, oh, yeah, it's great. I'll get it when it's on sale down the road. But when they see that cover, like my weird covers, which are all sort of pulp kind of comic book fiction covers, they get excited. And if the price is right, and the price should be about 99 cents, if you're not a big name writer, it should be about 99 cents. And here's to tell you a thing. Most people would consider me a pretty good mid-list writer. I charge 99 cents.
Yeah.
So
and that's for how long?
You got to kind of. For me, most of my prices are 99 cents, and then there's a few that I've moved up to $1.99. But then HarperCollins, they'll charge like $8.99, $12.99 for digital books, and I don't sell as many of those as I sell the 99 cents. I think everybody has to look at it this way. You are in the building your reader base portion of your career. Right. Everything has to serve getting those readers. Now, email is the big thing. You got to have an email list. It's got to be active. You got to use MailChimp, and you have to learn how to use it. You can't blow it out. You have to save it for when you're going to either help someone launch their book or you're going to launch your book. But Facebook is a dead end, and Twitter is a dead end. It's nice, but those are not places to market your book. They don't give you the reach. So, but cultivating a good email list, and you got to start with 2 signups, 10 signups, 2,000 signups. It takes a long time. You have to give away a lot of free stuff. But everything that you're doing is building the novel, building the reader base.
Absolutely. I went to the Smarter Artists conference or summit a little bit ago, and they had a bunch of people talked about email list building. And one of the things they really said is you can't let your list go stagnant and not put anything on, and then a year later say, hey, buy my book, and people are going to be like, I'm going to unsubscribe to that. And so I guess that's the trick, is how do you keep that connection, keep your readers engaged, and stay in contact is a challenge, I imagine. So. Yeah,
I think the guy who does it the best that I learned from is a writer named Michael Bunker. He's great. Yeah, and he shows you about his life. He's an off-grid Amish prepper who writes science fiction. Go figure that out. But people like his life. They like watching the stuff that he does. So the last thing you want to do as a writer is talk about your books or writing. There's a moment when you can do that. When you publish, you have about a 2-week window to be obnoxious about your book. And that's fine. But if you don't have anything coming out, well, you're going to laugh if you follow me on Facebook. Take pictures of donuts.
That's true. But you know what makes every time I see your donut pictures, I'm like, God, I'm so hungry for donuts right now.
Yeah. Just be interesting, invite people into your life, have fun, and that's what it is. It's not don't treat everybody like, I don't treat people like they're fans. I treat them like they're friends and people who read my books, and they are. So I think a lot of writers, they're trying to answer some personal question about whether they should have dated the homecoming queen or been the homecoming queen or not. It's not about that. It's just about making and here was the crazy thing. When I was at HarperCollins, they would pay for these expensive seminars and teaching sessions, and they would give them to all of us sort of nobody writers. And one of the things they said we went back and asked all the old schoolers like James Patterson and Stephen King and Anne Rice, and we said, how did you guys build your audience before social media? And the answer that always came back is they engaged with every reader no matter what. They replied to every email or every letter. They met them wherever they were, and it is the personal touch at the end of the day. Absolutely. There is no magic giveaway button. There's nothing. BookBub is dead. there's nothing that's going to legitimately propel you like writing a true novel that you did your best at and that it resonates, and then cultivating a group of people who will buy your book because they like you and they like your writing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's important. And that sounds like a lot more fun. You know, I can do that kind of marketing. That sounds like much more fun than trying to do some sort of magic hocus pocus stuff on the internet. You know. So.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
people
actually
that are promising you. Yeah, there are people out there promising you that if you'll give them money, they'll do it, and they won't. You just, you just got to write a good book and make friends.
So what do we see from you? What will we see in 2016 coming from you?
I'm gonna release that Dark Hollywood novel. I've got the third book in the Weird installment coming up. That'll be called The Lost Castle. That'll be out later this summer. I'm waiting from 4 different publishing companies on a pitch that I gave them. I'm most likely headed into fantasy or post-apocalyptic fantasy.
Oh, that
probably have mined. Yeah, I've mined the zombie genre enough, and I did I was, me and Hugh Howey were one of the original post-apocalyptic people. It's probably, I think that might have reached max saturation right now. So I think space opera is about to get very huge. I don't want to write that. I'm thinking about it, but I really do want to write fantasy. So I think I want to go to fantasy now.
I think fantasy's huge and is huger than people realize. You know, we've been around for a long time. And I think the space opera thing is good news for Josh because I know about some of his upcoming projects and they're pretty friggin' awesome. I can't wait to read
works
those.
for me.
If you would just get those out there, man, I'd be all over it.
Sorry, I'll try.
That was my hope. That was my hope for Star Wars, and I think it did do it. And Star Wars was actually this Star Wars, the latest one, was actually post-apocalyptic if you really analyze it. But it was the return to space opera with the hard SF nerds of the early 90s and late 80s, and I love hard SF, but it killed the genre because it's no fun.
Right.
We do want light speed, and we do want blasters, and we do want lightsabers, and
physics to be damned.
Exactly. So I think there's going to become a new renaissance in that.
Yeah, I did a bunch of research, and there's wish I could remember the name of this YouTube channel, but this guy talks about the science and a lot of the what the science would take to use a plasma weapon in some of the video games. And after watching him, I was like, all science fiction is soft science fiction because we just can't. You can try to explain it.
Yeah.
It's basically magic like fantasy. So we should all write fantasy. I like fantasy.
Yeah, just make it up and have fun and just do it winningly but everybody gets, like I said, they get so tied to, oh no, someone on the internet will jump on and criticize me. Who cares? Have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Do it. Well, Nick, it was fantastic to have you on the show. I'm really glad you decided to
thank you.
Hang out with us. We'll have to have you back on the show. We have
please, yeah.
Maybe sometime around when Dark Hollywood comes out, maybe we'll have talk about that and
I'll make sure you guys get advanced copies and
awesome.
I would love to come back on it if you ever want to just do Q&As.
Yeah, we actually do 3 shows. We have this show, which we call Live, which is an author interview, and then we do our The Right Stuff show, which is a craft show, and that would probably be really interesting to have you on. We pick topics and talk about different things about craft and things. That'd be fun to have you on.
That would be awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody, for coming in and joining us, everybody that watched us live. We appreciate you. And you can catch it on YouTube when it uploads. And we'll see you later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Everyone.
Goodbye.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.